Good evening and welcome to MOTS presents MOTS Ado About Nothing.
MOTS Ado About Nothing. MOTS Ado About Nothing.
Where we apply the revolutionary MOTS scale to classic and contemporary literature.
MOTS Ado About Nothing. MOTS Ado About Nothing.
This podcast contains mature content, spoilers, language. You have been warned.
Hello there, welcome back to MOTS Ado. And tonight, we'll be discussing the Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. I, of course, remain Scott Thurlow, here with Chris Morgan.
Good evening.
J. Ian Manzer.
I'm enjoying some fine wine myself.
Indeed you are. And Stephen Amosi.
Build up that wall.
All right. Well, we will indeed. So I think Chris has a funny logline for this story, and go ahead.
All in all, I'm just another drunk in the wall.
A dead drunk in the wall.
Sorry, dead drunk in the wall.
And we'll get to that, though. But yeah, that's pretty good. I like it. So we're going to go to E with the intro, body, conclusion.
Well, the plot of this story is fairly simple. A man feels aggrieved and but by a friend of his or some kind of associate.
An acquaintance of some sort.
And he lures him into catacombs to enjoy some fine wine, or at least to...
in the promise of enjoying some fine Amontillado.
In a way of also to test it to see if it's really the true vintage. And he instead seals him up in the wall of the catacombs and leaves him to die.
As you do.
The end.
Yep. It's a pretty short story, and it was funny because I think we all mentioned off-cast that in our mind this is like a longer story, but it was only like 6 or 7 pages or so.
But
it's very impactful, and so personally it is my favorite Edgar Allan Poe story ever, among even beyond the more famous ones, the more well-known ones, the more well-adapted ones, I guess. But, and I guess I'll tell you why soon enough. But
well, it certainly has the best opening line of any of
course, I agree to that. Possibly to anything that I've ever seen or read ever. And we'll get to that. But what are you deeming it?
Here's the thing is, it's a very, very short story, and perhaps this is unfair to judge it as such, but there is one trajectory of the story. I can't fully give it the idea that it has a complete intro, body, conclusion to it. In fact, in a way, it feels like you're entering the story about halfway through.
In like medias res kind of.
The introduction is an unspoken, as I mentioned, a grievance towards the protagonist.
Well, I'll address that later.
Well,
but I see.
I wouldn't say unspoken. Well, it's certainly spoken, but just as the narrator to you.
Or unwitnessed
sure
problem. And then you're watching in a sense, you don't see the antecedent, you see the consequent of an act. And for that, I have to give it a 2 out of 3. Just on that aspect. There's nothing against the fault of the story.
In a sense,
yes.
Yeah. But that's funny. I get it, though. I completely see what you mean. And when we get around to themes shortly, I guess I'll say why I chose this one specifically for that. But it ties into what you just said. But of course, I am biasedly going to give it a 3. I think it's one of my favorite short stories just ever outright to exist. And when I first read it, maybe back in high school, I loved it instantly. Again, the intro line, I never forgot that ever since then. And every once in a while I'll bring it up and think about it. But I certainly see what you mean about because it's so short, sort of snaps along pretty quickly. But I still think it stands. It has 3 legs. The intro is the opening monologue really. And then he follows his murder revenge plan through to a very good effect, I think. So I'm personally going to give it a 3, but with my admitted bias.
I'm probably coming on the side of Ian because I do like the story. I remember the first time I read it was in 8th grade, and it is a nice little ditty. But as I was reading it,
I don't know if it's nice, but it's enjoyable.
No, it is enjoyable. It's great. I mean,
but not nice. It's actually kind of fucked up if you think about it.
Oh, it's completely fucked up. I mean, getting suffocating, getting locked.
But in the best way.
Yeah. But by the same token, I'm reading it, and I'm like, yeah, I'm enjoying it. But I'm sitting here going, I think I like the idea of the story more. I like all the things that come from the story. I love I love the idea of the story, and not that the execution's bad. And I've read shorter stories than this that were like complete and so forth, and it's nothing against it. It just, I don't know. I'm going to give it a 2. I think as at the end of the day, I can't put my finger on it, but I just kind of feel that.
I get you both. What do you think, Steve-O?
I think this story has a very distinct beginning, middle, and end. The beginning is all him talking about this perceived slight. You don't know whether it's an actual horrible thing that Fortunato did or not. It doesn't really even matter. It's that you're in the head of the narrator who's about to seal somebody up into a damn wall, and you get that from the very first line, whereas
he says exactly what he's going to do.
And I don't want to screw it up, so I went and looked it up just so I don't mess up the wording.
It's okay. Go ahead.
The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as I best could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. So good. It's so good. And
I agree.
That gives you the entire beginning of the story. That's all you need to know
his entire motivation
about him without telling you what that insult
what injury was it?
Yeah, exactly. And then it goes into him talking to Fortunato, and then the end is when they get to their destination.
The big reveal.
And he starts sealing him up in the wall. And, you get the mild protest from the drunken idiot that's inside being sealed up. And you kind of jump from the narrator, even though Poe or whoever the narrator is,
Montresor,
even though Montresor is still narrating.
Fortunato,
yeah. Sorry, just blanking. You jump to Fortunato and kind of feel his point of view in the end game, and his horrible being sealed into this wall behind this wall, and you kind of feel for him, man. even though he you never get into his head. In terms of the story, you kind of feel for, you get a feel for what he's going through based on, he's building tension, and it comes together in the crazy and very well done ending that, you come to expect from Edgar Allan Poe. And I don't know if I agree with you, that's my favorite Edgar Allan Poe, but it is up there. And
that's all valid.
I really love this short story, and I'm going to give it a 3.
All right. So, Steve-O, continue talking about the themes.
I will. So the biggest theme in this is revenge, right? I think we can all agree on that. Probably
the most obvious theme, I guess I would
say. Sure. The idea of an insult can't go unpunished, and stuff like that, and you get deeper than that, why he feels insulted, why this is a problem, and all that. And I think that goes into themes as well, is how well do you... Here's something that I kind of just thought of, actually. How well do you know your own self in terms of this? Why are you angry at somebody? Why do you want to take revenge against somebody?
Yeah.
I don't think that the actual act that they committed isn't necessarily the most important part of that. It's how you feel about it,
by it, of course,
right?
Yeah.
Which is, I think, an interesting thing that we could go into in this.
I agree. So now the big reveal, sort of, is the reason I chose this one is because it is one of the earliest examples, earlier at least, of unreliable narration. To your point, to what you just said, and sort of tie into our Neophytes kind of mini series we've been exploring that aspect, that device, and it's possibly one of the most famous, maybe arguably, also uses of it. It's certainly influential, I think I would say.
Sure.
So I think that's sort of everything you said, theme of revenge against some perceived, however significant or not slight by one person against another. But that's sort of the thing, right? You don't know. And in fact, there might not be any slight at all. As I studied this story later on, in courses and so forth, and just seeing other analysis of it, it sort of got to me that you have what the narrator, what Montresor says to you, but nothing else, no other information whatsoever beyond that. And I think it's sort of interesting that if you don't notice that at first, you have to take him at his word. Mm-hmm. And I guess you still sort of do. But if you're able to delve into the fact that you're dealing with a narrator who's telling you his side of the story, but you have no other facts, no other omniscient third person, insertion of other data that may or may not change the actual interpretation of it.
Right.
So I think of course, that's strong to me. It's obvious that once you know about that. But definitely, of course, just the revenge. And like you said, if you feel slighted by someone else, no matter how imaginary or not it is, if that spurs you to murder, then that is, pretty.
But this isn't like even. It's the manner in which he's murdered. I mean, because it's like,
I suppose.
I mean,
it's worse than just outright killing him.
Yeah, because at some point, he starts getting a little hysterical, laughing.
It's an elaborate death plot.
Yeah, I mean, like in other words, it's just like he knows what's going on, and there's no way out of it, and nobody's ever going to come looking for him, and it's kind of like this bizarre resolution he has. So it's not even like he took him down there, hit him over the head when he wasn't looking, put him, killed him, put him in a wall. I mean, he was fully aware of it. So it's not even like just revenge. It's like, I think the manner in which he gets his revenge it has to be taken into account.
Well, I'll just read from you the story itself to address what you just said. In the opening intro, after the 1,000 injuries line you just read, a wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. However, is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. So again, Montresor, the narrator, feels as if the only way he can make himself equal, the only justice to be had here, is to kill Fortunato in such a way, in this exact manner.
He tasks me, and I shall have him.
Yes, exactly. Gregory.
Fortunato, fate, obviously, in that there's no. In a sense, Fortunato had no element of escape here. It was his destiny to be buried in there. Why is it his destiny? You said that there's no information outside of the narrator's point of view. You're given information about the history of the family there, which is the family's crest.
Okay, you're right about that. It's good detail.
No wrong shall be go unpunished.
No one strikes me with impunity, yes. I believe.
This is, in a way, another aspect of fate there, that he is burying his enemy amongst his own family. He is covering the deed with the bones of his ancestors. It's like, in a way, he's driven, in a sense, the idea of destiny in here, of him having to fulfill his family's legacy. And Fortunato's name is fated to do this. And again, you see Fortunato, and yeah, he seems kind of a dick. But
does he though?
He seems like a reveler.
He seems like a doofus, I guess.
He actually does seem like a dick because because at one point he was asking him, he was talking about being a Mason. He's like, I'm a Mason. He goes, you a Mason? Impossible. And we all know that the Masonic Lodge and so forth, but he's literally a Mason. So it was like, I didn't know if
touch.
And he's a Mason who died by being
right. It's an ironic death,
Mason.
Of course.
Right. And I was wondering if we should go into this with style, but I was thinking about him, basically what Ian was saying about him being an insufferable prick. The fact that
I don't know if he used those words.
Well, no,
I wasn't that strong.
But seriously, I mean,
he's a prick, just not insufferable.
This guy is sitting here. He's like, the other guy couldn't tell. He wouldn't be able to tell Amontillado. And
he doesn't know shit about wine. What an asshole.
Yeah, he doesn't know shit about wine. So he's walking down there, and he's on the one. He's like, "Oh, let's go, my man. You've got this Amontillado." And while he's down there, he's still insulting him. So it's just here's 1,001, 1,002 injuries, 1,003 injuries.
Vaguely, but
so I'm just saying he.
I see what you mean.
He just keeps insulting him till the end. It's like,
I want to though, but I don't really.
So he deserved to be sealed up, is what you're saying.
Maybe
you would have sealed him up if you had known him.
I would have sealed anybody up, really.
I don't think I'd bother with him, but I don't know what the other 99, 999 injuries were. So
nobody does, but I want to I don't want to not rebut, but to offer something that you just said. Yeah, he says his family motto and crest is that. But again, we have to take him at his word. What if it isn't that? What if he just made that up? And that's
that's true. He might not be a Mason. He says that he is, but does he?
I think it's clear he's not a Mason. But
he says that he is.
Yeah, of course he says it after I believe Fortunato makes some sort of secret sign if you are in the Guild of Masons, and Montresor clearly does not know it. But he's like, oh, I'm a Mason, and he produces the trowel that he's going to wall him up with. That's an ironic foreshadowing of his death. Doesn't mean he's a Mason. Just yeah, if you take him at his face word that, oh, my family crest is X and my motto is this, he could have just made that up because they thought it was a badass thing to say because it pertained to the situation.
Sure.
And that's sort of interpretation that it isn't mine. I can't take all full credit. I read that one like years after originally reading the story. I was like, it made me stop and think like, yeah, we don't know. That's the information. Again, it's not outside information per se. So I just want to like again, throw that in there to the point of the unreliableness of this entire story.
That's true.
I guess the only outside information that you really get is that you are going through his family's like
their vault, their catacombs,
their catacombs.
Sure.
And there's a bunch of wine down there.
That much is true, I guess we can say.
So that they have money. I mean, like, right? So that's what you can figure out. You know that they have money, and like
they're fairly well-to-do off, probably merchant family.
A lot of nitra.
A lot of nitra.
I think it's just niter, isn't it? But
whatever.
Anyways, I'm going to give themes a 1 because of all that stuff, and because even like I said, you could think about it. Sure.
Sure.
Like you might as well.
Is there still that wine in the basement, Steve? Do you want to go get us some bottle?
I'll show you some. Come with me later. So anyways, that'll bring...
Tonight.
You're good?
Yeah.
That will bring me to antagonist, which is sort of a tricky one, because it might be Montresor himself, or it might be like your own psyche when you feel so slighted by someone or something that you are driven to such an extreme act. There's certainly nothing antagonizing him himself if we agree that he's the main character, because he's the narrator.
Fortunato.
Maybe, but like I said...
All of the insults.
I know, like it's tricky because he certainly feels antagonized by something, but it's not really like shown or portrayed all that much. Yeah. But it's an interesting thing because like, again, just a broad real life thing. If you're so like slighted by some act or something happening in the world that it drives you to, again, extreme actions, that is an antagonist because you're being antagonized by something, whether again, however real and whatever extent it may be.
Could it be his own madness?
Yeah, it could be, yes.
If Fortunato never actually did anything to him, but he perceived all of his actions as personal slights, then the antagonist could certainly be his own, whatever, like, like whatever is
his damaged psyche.
Ailing him.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I agree. Like, that's sort of how I, like, probably going to view it, Steve-O. Yeah. Like, it's the one I usually think of, and the one I, like, apply the most to this story when I think about it, but what do you guys think?
I don't know how, like, depends on what level of a monster the narrator is.
Mm-hmm. Dude, we just don't know.
Yeah, if he is
level 2 monster.
And the thing is, I think on every level you want to look at it, whether he is in fact mad, he is in a sense a prototype kind of Dexter character who's killing people that he feels, or actually Hannibal Lecter probably is a better.
I was going to say, I'm surprised you didn't go with that one first, but surely I agree with that to an extent.
He insulted me at this party. I'm going to
fuck this guy. He's got to go. Yeah.
Or if he actually if he is going by his like family's motto, and like, but I think at every level you want to interpret it as he is antagonized by something.
Yeah,
and it's generally either Fortunato himself or his perception of Fortunato. So I'd probably have to give it a 1.
I like that interpretation, and like I said, largely agree. And even beyond that, I think Chris.
I'll give it a 1.
All right.
Yeah, I think I feel similar.
Did you fall for your own argument? You certainly convinced me.
I wasn't sure that I was going to give this a 1, but there is something antagonizing the main character, and I think it's mostly his own psyche throughout at least throughout the story. Like, Fortunato's not actually doing any active antagonizing.
He's coughing a lot.
I almost said antagonization, and I was like, that's not a word.
No, I like it though. Should make it 1.
But he's not actively antagonized by Fortunato, but what he is actively antagonized, and it's a specter felt throughout this story, is the perceived slights, the real or perceived slights of Fortunato that took place before the story existed, which is a really interesting thing, right? The antagonist of this story is completely off screen in this, and just completely like Fortunato, as he's portrayed in this story, is not antagonizing at all. But if he is what the main character thinks that he is, then yeah, he's a dick. And if he's not, then the main character's own psyche is the antagonist here, and like making him think that Fortunato is just being an asshole to him, for lack of a better term. every time that he opens his mouth and speaks.
Well, generally, Fortunato does insult good taste with his activities. So if you're of that disposition, he would be offensive to you. So,
I like that. So something is antagonizing someone to some degree,
Sure.
we'll call it.
Sure.
And we'll get enough for a 1.
I can agree with that.
All right. Well, that'll bring protagonist with Chris.
I'm going to say the protagonist and the antagonist can fall into the same as, oh Christ, what is his name again?
Montresor.
Because we, again, as the unreliable narrator, I mean, he is giving us, he is telling us the entire story. He can be the antagonist and protagonist. I don't really have much to say that because I feel like they're kind of like one and the same. One is a reaction to the other. He is antagonized by whatever external, whether it's his psyche or whether it's, he's got the bully mentality where, he can wrong, but somebody wronged him once. You mean, you don't really know who this
Or 1,000 times.
or 1,000 times.
We just don't know, dude.
Wrong me 999 times.
It's cool.
Shame on you.
Yeah.
Wrong me 1,000 times.
Across
Shame on
this
me.
line, you do not insult me, dude.
But either way, I think he works as both, whether his psyche, whatever is antagonizing him, he is both the antagonist and the protagonist.
Sure, no, I get what you're saying, and I largely agree, Gary.
So to go back to my point about the antagonist, depending on how you want to view not Fortunato, the narrator, Montresor, I feel that it's different levels of tragedy to this character, depending on, or he's either a villain or petty or
both, or mad.
And
or all three.
I think if you look at, no matter how you want to look at this character, and because he's unreliable, you don't know exactly what it is. You can find an intriguing character no matter what interpretation you want to take of it. So I have to give him 1 for that.
I mean, again, I largely agree. Both your points, pretty much, I don't have all that much more to add. I think we discussed the interesting points, but I just want to point out, I thought you guys would mention that he's a connoisseur of wine, and perhaps that would give him some bump him up a little bit. And in fact, I'm drinking wine only for this episode.
Cheers.
To be clear, I'm enjoying a glass of not Amontillado,
A pint of
but
wine.
for this.
Ripple.
But I am going to give him a 1, probably just for everything you said, and if you have anything else to expand upon, Steve-O.
I'm going to take the part of Ian in this episode and maybe hurl a little grenade into this bad boy.
Right. Make it a small grenade glass of wine.
What makes a good protagonist? Because I'm not sure he is a good protagonist, to be honest. What to you in a work of fiction makes a good protagonist?
Interesting motivation, at least in part.
Okay, so 1 is a well-realized character. And that might be your big complaint there because, again, the unreliability of it brings that question in there. And that's why I attempted to do, or at least to address the fact that there is multiple interpretations of him. And in a way, it adds on a different axis, a fleshed out character. But also, I understand his motivation, as Scott was saying. I understand a lot about this character with what little information I have that I can draw. I says that, like, on the x-axis of a traditional character development, there's a number of versions of him on the y-axis, which I feel that all
I really like that analogy.
Kind of have. There's elements that you can say that each of them is correct, and which makes it, I don't know. And altogether, it comes out to a fully fleshed out character.
Okay. The reason I ask, I guess, is because
definitely a good question. Nice one.
I mean, the reason I ask, and this is kind of we've done a ton of these episodes, and the reason I ask now, I guess, is because I'm not sure what this character is in terms of protagonist, right? Like when you say, what's a good antagonist? Or what is the protagonist antagonized by is a good way to talk out
to view it,
who the antagonist is. And like we don't have a similar thing for protagonist. And I was trying to think of like, do I think that Montresor is a good protagonist? I think that Montresor is kind of a stand-in for Edgar Allan Poe, to be honest, in in this story.
That's really funny and interesting. I never
Actually, yeah, we had talked about that when we had studied this in school. That he may have been some upper class douchebag that pissed him off at the bar, or
when he was in Italy.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
and Edgar Allan Poe is like, I fucking hate that guy. I wish I could wall him up.
And in lieu of walling him up, he wrote a story about him. Yeah.
Sure.
And like, I don't know if he's a good protagonist. I'm struggling with it. I think that I'm probably going to give this a 0, just because.
I certainly see what you're
saying.
Not
that I don't like the character, I guess, but I see him as a vessel for the story more than a fully fleshed out character.
I do like that, the way you phrase that. I mean, it doesn't stop me in my tracks, but it's an angle that I normally wouldn't have thought of, and perhaps I'm blinded from my bias for it. But I was going to answer your question. I thought of another thing, that if I identify with the character, and obviously identify with Montresor, perhaps you're saying he was like an author avatar for Poe,
sure,
to some extent, maybe. But I do see what you mean. I can see why you would give him a 0. Like, I totally get it, and it makes sense. I'm just still going to stick with a 1, but you're going with a 0.
I think I'm going to go with a 0 on this.
And I'm not really going to fault you for it.
It's a tough one, but I feel more strongly towards the 0 than I do towards the 1 on this.
Oh, that's fair.
I like a lot of what you said, but I have to give it a 1 now because of that amazing appeal to different axes. So,
Ian, you came very close to swaying me. I was on a strong 0 at first, and I was like, I don't know now. Like, I had to reevaluate.
So you're each giving a 1 to your own arguments, at least.
Exactly.
All right, you got
Chris, you're a 1 too, right?
Yep.
All right.
The old 1 too.
And that'll bring us to secondary characters, slash supporting with E.
All right, I'm giving this a 0 straight off the bat, but I'm going to make an argument and see if I can convince myself. Okay. 1, the only other named character with the L, what's his name? Lucrezi.
Sounds like a guy from Godfather.
Yeah. I don't stereotype Italians.
Sorry, I just said it sounds like his name.
I think this guy would be a very nice guy to drink wine with, even though I never meet him. He sounds very knowledgeable. I would much rather drink wine with him than Fortunato.
Seriously.
But I would also have to say, perhaps you can make an argument for Montresor's family and the legacy in the crypt.
Yeah.
But as you pointed out, that might be a fallacy. In fact, it might not even be his family's crypt. It could be someone else's.
I was going to make that point earlier, but not see it. You realize it on your own.
Yes. I there's some arguments to be made, but I don't think they're as in the service of unreliability. What gave to me a 1 for the narrator has to give a 0
here
to secondary.
Yeah, I mean, I probably pretty much agree. I don't have much more to say, but I'm going to sort of steal your line that you said, Sivo, that Fortunato is basically a mechanism, a vehicle for the plot. Like, he's somewhat characterized.
He's a plot device.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the only one I was pretty much wavering on because I wanted to give the story a perfect 10, of course, because it's one of my favorites, but I don't know if all good faith I can because of that very fact.
You count Fortunato as a supporting character and not the antagonist?
Yeah, well, it sort of depends, like we just talked out, but even so, like, if not him, then there's nobody else, really, like, other than,
Jay-Z's just spoken about.
They're just descriptions, essentially. Yeah. So, yeah, I think I might have to give this one maybe a default 0, but I do like the point that you also raised, so it probably, maybe if it was a soft 0 before, maybe it's a solid 0 now, but I think just by virtue of that fact, I'm going to give it a 0.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Like, I think the best argument to be made for supporting is the story of the family, right? The story of Montresor's family, but it's not strong enough for me to give it a 1. I'm going to give it a 0.
Fair enough. You think, Chris?
I'm going to give him a 0, but I was just thinking that I like the idea that the vaults or the catacombs might be Lucrezi, whatever, and that afterwards, and that hold on, I'm writing the sequel to this because afterwards, Montessori goes up. Montresor goes up and he starts drinking with Lucrezi, and they're both wasted. And he goes, "Hey, where'd Fortunato go?" It's like, I locked him in your family. I I walled him in your family vault, and they all laugh because of the absurdity and don't give it a second
it's like the
thought.
thing from was that John Cusack movie? He's like, so what do you do? He's like, oh, I'm just an assassin. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
it's a rising market.
Yeah.
The Cask of Amontillado 2, the new vintage.
Revenge of the Crazy.
Yeah, it'll be like
Actually, that's a really good. That's awesome.
yeah, it's
Nice.
like a.
We'll be writing that soon someday here on Lost Signals.
The new vintage. Yes.
Watch out for that trailer that we're gonna make. But does that mean you're probably giving them a 0?
Oh, I'm giving.
Yes.
There's
0, 0, 0,
Yeah.
0.
This vintage of secondary characters gets a 0.
Mhm.
All right, and that'll bring us to one of my favorite parts. But Steve-O, you get to speak about dialogue.
Dialogue. I love the dialogue in this story. It's terrific. It's perfectly concise, I guess is the best term for it. There's a lot of explanation of what's going on and all this type of stuff, but the dialogue gets right to the point. And
Yeah.
not only that, but it gets right to the point in such a way that it is very I don't know what the best way to describe this is. It says exactly what it needs to say in as few words as possible and gets out. But as Edgar Allan Poe always does, in a poetic way, which is beautiful, and I love that about all of his dialogue and everything that he writes, and that's, I guess, where I'm going to leave. That's all I have to say about it.
Here.
I'm going to jump in on that because, in a poetic way, because I'm reading a lot of the dialogue, and this, this could be like a musical. It's just like, yes, yes. You impossible? A Mason, yes.
Amontillado, I have my doubts. Amontillado, and I must satisfy them. Amontillado?
Oh man, that's what we should do. Write a musical.
Make a musical. Okay.
Watch out for that too. Coming soon.
Yeah. So it's very. I mean, his inner monologue. The first line of it is incredible, but the dialogue between the two of them is very lyrical. I love that. That flows really, really well. So I'm definitely giving this a strong one.
Yeah, very strong.
And as the only actual view you have of Fortunato is through his dialogue, I think they do, giving you actually the perfect picture of doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Whether, yes, you can believe that he's a dick from his dialogue, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he caused enough offense to warrant death. So
he almost certainly didn't, based on his dialogue, I would think.
But like I said, I guess we'll never know.
What could he have possibly done?
He might be a cheerful drunk.
Yeah. We'll conjecture about that elsewhere. But I do agree, of course, and as you said, I would always say this about Poe, dialogue and style sort of flows together in a bit because of the poetic nature to it, as you said. But I will give my one example, aside from the opening monologue, as we have already mentioned a number of times. This is Fortunato's quote. The coughs, he's speaking about when Fortunato's coughing. Fortunato says, "The cough's a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough." True, I replied.
Did this remind you guys of anything specifically? I don't want to say it, but
just say it.
I thought you guys might have thought it.
Many things remind me of this.
It reminded me of Hell or High Water.
No.
When he was when he coughs, he's like, "It's fine," and he keeps going.
I'm fine. Yeah. And I see what you mean. Actually, that was Nocturnal Animals, I believe.
I was. I'm sorry.
But I see what you mean. But it did not remind me of that.
It reminded me of that for sure.
At least when reading.
I don't think much about Nocturnal Animals.
I try not to. That's why I signed that good part to another movie.
Fair enough. That's really funny.
And a very good movie at that.
Anyways, I'm giving dialogue a huge, strong 1. An Amontillado 1.
Completely agree. Yeah.
A fine vintage.
Yes. All right, which in fact brings me to style, which, as I said just previously, somewhat linked. I mean, it's Edgar Allan Poe. He sort of invented some of the styles. Maybe, like I said, the device of unreliable narration doesn't start here per se, but certainly you can point to a lot of influences that it did affect later on. So I don't have much more to say. It's classic for a reason. There's a reason we still read Edgar Allan Poe. There's still adaptations. Granted, maybe not this story per se, but in general, and as applied to the dialogue that we spoke about earlier. So I don't have much more to say about it. Style gets fucking 1 from me for sure.
I decided when we were going to talk about style, what I was going to do is just go to a random part of this and just read something because you can do that in this story.
Best example for one
and
ever.
it'll be amazing. So here it is. I'm going to read 3 paragraphs. It's very quick. Here, I knocked off the neck of a bottle, which I drew from a long row of its fellows that lay upon the mold. "Drink," I said, presenting him the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me familiarly while his bells jingled. And, like, you can read any part of this, and it's like, that's poetry. And
it's well
that's
described.
not the best. That's not the best part of this story. But like I said, I was going to go to a random part and read whatever
it's
I saw.
Funny because that follows just a line I just read.
Yeah, exactly. So it works out perfectly. And like, it doesn't matter what part of this you read. It's Edgar Allan Poe. His style is unparalleled. Like, just so very often, quote unquote, copied. Hey, everybody on film that's watching this, I'm making air quotes,
they can
copied,
see
but certainly not
never replicated.
Done, not done nearly as well as he figured out how to do. I just don't like a lot of times I read the stuff that he writes and I'm like, what, this should be terrible. Like, this should just be like awful trite bullshit, but it's so perfectly done. Like, this is the reason that there is trite bullshit, because he wrote this and then other people try to copy it and it's terrible.
Yep.
We're totally setting this to music. The Amontillado ejaculated my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. Oh yeah, this is gold.
So it's a gold one. What do you think?
Like a ghastly rapid river through a pale door, a hideous throng rush out forever and laugh but smile no more. That's not from this one, but it's
but it is
my
Poe.
favorite.
Jesus.
Uh-oh. It's so good that it literally blew Steve-O's headphones off.
That's my favorite Poe line. He's fantastic. Although, I think we didn't rate Mask of the Red Death quite.
I don't remember. Victor back catalog.
I think that got like a 7 or an 8.
Yeah, but this is
listen to it.
This is one of the best.
Last year.
Again, one of the best works of Poe, and like stylistically, he's at the top of his game for this.
I
I'm
agree, of course. All right. Well, that'll bring us to recommendation, which is not on me first. It's to Chris.
If you haven't read this in 7th, 8th grade, high school, or college, I highly recommend reading it. Don't let the fact that, obviously with this story, it's a great story to read, but it's a better story to actually talk about, because it is an enjoyable read. But as you can see just from our conversation, and I hope you'd find the same thing if you talk about it. It is a great story to talk about. And,
talk amongst yourselves.
And in like in 5 pages, it spawned. It was the impetus for so many different kinds of tropes, different kinds of themes, murders, plots. So
my first murder was inspired by this.
So yeah, I highly recommend it. It is a very, very important thing, I think, for everybody to read. I think it's a one of those definitely needs to read.
Well, I kind of gave my recommendation in style, and
you
just to affirm,
it's as I said, it's top of his game. I think this is one of the best opening lines of any Poe work. And I think that if you haven't read this in a very long time, it's something you can read and like be refreshed quickly and enjoy again.
Exactly.
And I've read this several times now throughout my life, and it's I enjoy it even after all the times I've read it. So yeah, a strong one for that.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just to build off of that, like it's a max 15-minute read, and it's such a good short story. It's like a way better version of going back and reading the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark books.
Oh, I love those.
I love them too, but obviously Edgar Allan Poe is a better writer than whoever wrote those, the random folks that wrote those stories. But like, it's got that kind of feel to it, where it's just this really short, quick, scary, like, not scary, like, jumping out, like something jumping out of the dark, but like scary, like, oh, this is the depths that the human psyche can go to, and Edgar Allan Poe loved to explore that type of stuff, and this is one of the better ones that this is one of the better ways that he did that, and it's one of the shorter, quicker reads, and just, if you haven't read it in a while, read it again. It's so good.
Yep, I mean, I agree. I don't have much more to say. I, of course, did recommend it outright and always will because of everything you guys just said and just, like I said, its influence and its impact, at least on me and literature in general and Poe himself. So, anyone else got any final thoughts about the Cask of Amontillado? I'm going to take a quick sip, and I believe Ian will give us the breakdown or the aggregate.
Amontillado?
Amontillado. Cheers to Amontillado.
So, Scott gave it the highest score with a 9. And the rest of us gave it an 8, giving 8.25 overall.
Yeah, I think that's maybe not low, but I think it still stands. It's higher score.
It's just amazing, like, in 5 pages, what came out of the story.
Yeah, I agree. So I think that'll do it. Don't have much more to say. This has been What to Do. We've discussed The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. I've been here with Stephen Amosi.
Yep, don't get buried behind a wall.
By fake revenge. And Jane Manzer.
I've got 99 problems, but Fortunato is no longer one.
Nice. And Chris Morgan.
Good night.
I, of course, am Scott Thurlow, and no one strikes us without impunity. Good night.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.